Think about the best team that you've ever been a part of. What made it great? Now, on the flip side, think about the worst team that you've ever been on. What went wrong? Well, today we are diving into what separates strong teams from dysfunctional teams and how you can create a culture of collaboration that actually works. I've invited my dear friend, Dr. Carol Wheeler, to join us today. She is a leadership expert and someone who I admire so much. I've heard her speak many times about the importance of effective teams, and I wanted you to be able to learn from her as well. Carol, I would love to start the podcast by having you tell us about your background in leadership and what took you from the spark in the beginning to where you are today.
I've been fascinated by teams and leadership since I was about 18 years old. So I actually, as a college student, did every single leadership thing that I could. If there was a leadership training or a leadership group or a student activity that I could participate in around leadership, I did it. Because that really got me started learning about leadership. But since then, I spent about 15 years working in administration in higher education, supervising teams and running teams and supervising leaders. That really gave me a lot of experience. I went on to get my PhD in leadership, which gave me a lot of academic knowledge and opportunities to do research. And after I got my PhD, I worked on the faculty side in higher ed for about 15 years, some with undergrads, and then for about 10 years, primarily with graduate students getting their doctorate in leadership and helping them conduct research, primarily in the corporate world, some in nonprofit, some in education, but a lot in the corporate world. And so I really have a lot of experience in both the research and academic side, as well as the practical side. And for about the last 6 years, I have run my business, Nova Leadership, which exists to help leaders and teams be really effective. I particularly love helping managers and supervisors become really great at their job, because I believe when you have a great supervisor, a great manager, you have a much better work experience. Therefore, you go home at the end of the day in a better mood, with a better attitude, and that makes your family life better. So I know this might seem like hyperbole to some, but I truly think we make the world a better place when we help leaders become better in the work.
And I love the connection that you just said about when people are well led at work and feel engaged at work, it carries over to the person they are outside of work too. Carol, you emphasized that leaders should become the best version of themselves versus try to fit into like a cookie cutter model of what the textbooks say a leader is. How have you seen that played out? And how can leaders find their own style to be successful?
I think one of the first places to start, Mindy, is to recognize we are trying to fit into a mold in which we don't belong. And I find that what that often looks like is awkward. Right? And we've all done it. And we've all tried to be somebody that we're not. Mm-hmm. And it feels awkward and it doesn't feel natural and it kind of feels weird. And the reality is the people that you're trying to lead feel that maybe even more than you do.
Yeah.
And so when we have this idea that a leader is supposed to be a certain way, and we try to live into that, regardless of whether any of that is within our natural talent zone, our natural zone of genius, then it is awkward and it usually doesn't work. And then that's really frustrating for us as leaders. Why not people responding to this? I believed that if I was, like for instance, visionary leadership is one of the things we talk about. Like a visionary leader sets the tone and has big ideas and inspires their people. And if you have somebody who is primarily relationship-based or strategic thinking-based, and a lot of their thought process is internal and meant for one-on-one communication, and they try to spend a lot of time up in front of the room, inspiring and having good speeches, it's not going to work very well.
Mm-hmm.
Same leader, they lean into that deep thinking and those deep relationships to help longer one-on-one conversations where they share that vision um, from their ideal, like the way that they communicate best, then it will make a big difference in how people see it. And so just knowing who you are and becoming the best version of yourself will help you become the leader that you're supposed to be. One of the things, I spent a couple of decades doing leadership research and reading leadership research. And one of the things that is consistently true is there is no one way that leadership always works.
Yeah, that truly is fascinating. And I think it's also something that can just ease the stress of being a leader when we get to be a leader in the way that we're wired and not necessarily a textbook version that we have to be a cookie cutter like everyone else.
Absolutely.
So, as you talk about people leaning into how they're wired and the strengths that they have, it reminds me that you are an expert in Clifton strengths. How do you use that to help teams and leaders be more effective?
Great question. So I've been using Clifton Strengths to work with leaders and teams since about 2007. That's when I was um, first began to learn about strengths and went to Gallup and got trained. Um, and I spent a lot of time using it in higher ed. And now I primarily use it with leaders and teams. The power of strengths to me is that, unlike other assessments, the developmental model, so it's made to measure what our innate talents are, what those things are that we have the greatest capacity to be truly great at. But it doesn't say we're already there. It says, here's where your potential is. Now, how can you develop that? How can you grow into that? So that's the way I primarily use it with leaders and teams, is helping them understand. And with adults, most of the time, most of us, if we haven't taken the assessment before, we haven't named it the same thing, but we've probably some of those strengths we have developed, we have leaned into. There are probably others that we haven't. And so the assessment helps us really see where we are. What talents are you really using well on a regular basis? And what talents have you not had an opportunity to develop that might make you even better at your current job or to succeed in the way that you really want to succeed? So we start there with the individual. Strengths also really helps us. One of the things about effective teams is effective teams are usually pretty diverse. More diverse teams are more productive and more effective. The reason that is because they have more perspectives, more ideas, more different ways of doing things, right? If you put a team together that all have very similar strengths and all look very similar, it's not much better than just having one of those people. You can imagine that diversity in the team can also cause a lot of conflict, right? The more diversity, the more effective the team, but also the greater the conflict. And so strengths help us understand where each person is coming from and why that is positive.
Yeah.
If I can give you an example, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Deliberative is a strength that's very low on my particular list, right? Of the 34 talents, it's something like 32 or 33. Deliberative is a executing strength that helps people really understand risk. They want to deliberate. They want to think deeply before they take action, and they want to assess every possible risk. Now, my talent themes, I have strategic, I have activator, I have several fast thinking, fast moving, look, go. And so you can see where that it can sometimes be a conflict with deliberative. But when I've worked with people who have deliberative in the past, one of the beautiful things is they are going to see risks that I am completely going to miss. So I can look at them and go, you're slowing me down. You're not letting me act. You're keeping our team from moving forward. Or I can go, oh, wow, you're helping me not miss some big things that I would otherwise miss.
I have a funny example with that because I am like you. I am very strong in strategic and activator, and I'm married to someone who's very high deliberative. So just imagine us playing a game of Scrabble together. I'm like, what is taking you so long to figure out your answer? And he's like, wow, how did you do that so quick? And just, personally being in that relationship has helped me to understand his strengths as compared to mine, and that both are very valuable. And you've actually inspired me to become a Clifton Strengths coach as well. And I use it both with companies I consult, but I use it mainly with job seekers to help them understand the strengths that they bring to an organization and how to apply them to their work.
It's so powerful in that context to help somebody understand how to describe what they can do. Love it.
It really is. And I tell job seekers all the time, it helps you to be able to describe yourself. One of the hardest parts about interviewing is thinking of how to describe yourself. And so it's really a nice roadmap for that.
Love it.
So, Carol, one of the things that you are an expert in is conflict management. And I'd love to hear some of the big mistakes you think leaders are making when they're trying to handle conflict on their team.
Conflict is such an interesting thing, Mindy, because our general instinct is to make it go away as fast as possible.
Yes.
I think that is often the mistake that leaders make, is trying to minimize it and trying to make it go away as fast as possible. And when I teach conflict, I try to teach leaders to distinguish between emotional, personal conflict and what we call, which is conflict about ideas or ways of doing things. And the reality is, when I talked earlier about those teams that are more effective because they're more diverse, the conflict they have the most of that is actually really important is that substantive conflict about ideas. We make better decisions when we have more ideas, but we have to work through the conflict and have the discussion, respectful, kind, etc. But we have to be able to have that conversation about differing ideas that aren't going to both work. We can't do all of these things, but having that difficult conflict and talking through the different ideas and why they might work in different ways and making helps teams and our pairs make better decisions. And so when we always try to minimize conflict or make it go away, we're actually missing the benefit of having diverse ideas at the table, right? So we have to learn how to teach people to have productive conflict that walks through ideas and helps them think through things, but doesn't devolve into blaming and big emotions and you're wrong and I'm right and you're mean because you're wrong, or, all that kind of stuff. We can't go that direction. But sometimes to avoid that, leaders just try to make all conflict go away.
Just ignore it and just think if everyone could just get along, we would be fine. But truly, as you said, helping everyone get along is to help them engage and share ideas and facilitate that conversation.
Absolutely. One of my favorite tools for that right now is crucial conversations. I've been doing some workshops around crucial conversations and teaching teams how to have those conversations. And I've done some really cool trainings with it recently.
So, Carol, in a conflict situation with leaders and teams, how do you guide or direct them to have these crucial conversations?
So first, I think it's helpful to define a crucial conversation. The authors of the book Crucial Conversations define that as the situation when opinions vary, stakes are high, and emotions run strong. So when we identify a situation like that, it's useful to step back and go, hey, I need to handle this really. It matters how we handle this, right? And not to squish it, not to make it go away, but to really think through it. And I'm going to give you two other quotes from the book that it's so rich, right? One of the things they say is the mistake most of us make in our crucial conversations is we believe we have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a friend or a colleague, right? And so our question we should be asking ourselves instead is, how can I be 100% honest while also being 100% respectful? That's how we maintain the relationship while also having the difficult conversation. Now, I do a half-day training on this, so this is a very simplified version, right? I realize that figuring out how to be 100% honest and 100% respectful is not that straightforward. You don't just say it and then you do it. It is a process. But that's a really good barometer to help you decide, like, am I doing this well? Right? Am I able to really be honest? Can truly be yourself?
Absolutely. And a leader who can have crucial conversations is so beneficial to a team in conflict because they can model it and teach their team the value that comes from kind of going through the storm instead of around the storm.
Absolutely.
That's the visual I use all the time. It's just that, there's a storm in front of me and I can go around it. I could stop and not move anywhere, or I can actually be brave and go through it.
When I get to the other side, I'm actually done with it rather than
Yeah.
it just sitting there and following me around.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's a great addition to my visual for sure. Speaking of Gallup, Gallup has released a report that states that globally we have the most disengaged workforce that we've ever had. And in the US, it's a little bit better, but it's still really low compared to even pre-pandemic results. So I would love to pick your brain about that and talk about engaged employees versus disengaged. So from your experience, what are some practical ways that leaders can foster commitment and collaboration within their teams to increase that employee engagement?
I think this is a really challenging issue. And a lot of it, many leaders will attribute it to generations and to lots of different things. But we can really think about this very simply. What employees need to be engaged, to be seen, known, and valued.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Employees who feel seen, known, and valued in their workplace seldom show up as disengaged and seldom leave their organization. So if that's our goal, is to have them engaged, then we want to be thinking about how do we make sure they feel seen, known, and valued. Honestly, and this comes from the Gallup engagement survey, I think one of the things we miss is starting with the basics and the simple stuff. So the first two questions on the Gallup, the Q12, the Gallup engagement survey are about, do you understand what's expected of you at work? And do you have the resources and materials to do your job? Generally in the workplace, we assume the answer to those two questions for everybody is yes, and we don't bother to ask it.
Yes.
It is often not true. And if I don't understand what's expected of me and I don't have what I need to do my job, then nothing else matters. So I can have a leader who's checking in on my personal life and talking to me about my future growth and development and all those kind of things. But if I don't know what I'm supposed to do here on a daily basis and I don't have what I need to do it, then that is very frustrating. And no amount of great relationship with my leader can really truly overcome that. I think starting there. And then the second piece, when we get past the foundational stuff, Gallup also just released some new research. They have talked about the 4 needs of followers for a long time, right? And what Gallup has discovered is the number one follower need right now, the thing that shows up in big ways in the research is hope. Followers and employees want to feel hope. So how can you give them hope, right? That their job is going to continue to exist, that the company is going to treat them well, that the company is going to succeed, and therefore they're not going to disappear out from under them. All of those things, people are looking for hope, right? And so how can we pay attention to our employees, make them feel seen, known, and valued, and give them hope? And if we can do those things, which is unfortunately not easy, but really important, they're going to stick around and they're going to become engaged.
What are some practical ways that a leader could give their employee hope?
I think the thing that is the first thing that you need to do that is counterintuitive is tell the truth.
Thinking that too.
Yeah, even if the situation in your business or in your company is dire, even if things are hard, right? An employee who knows, okay, things are rough around here, but here's what leadership is doing to try to fix it, has a lot more hope than an employee who's just wondering what in the world is going on around you.
Every time they wonder, it's a distraction.
Right. And their engagement goes down. They have very little hope for the future. They generally will assume the worst for good reason. Like we've given them plenty of reason to assume. Absolutely. But I think that's not, we kind of want to be like, well, I don't want them to think everything's falling apart, so I won't tell them. But yeah, it's counterintuitive, but the best way to give hope is to be truthful.
That transparency is so important. And in this day and age where layoffs are pretty common and the news can be a downer, if you look at the job market, it's important for people to have that connection with their leader and with the company so that they feel that hope that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Carol, I have really appreciated all of your wisdom and advice on this podcast. And I want to ask just one final question. So, if a leader is listening to this episode and they could walk away with just one action step to improve their team's success today, what would that be?
I'm going to say form a connection with your people. Talk to them, listen to them, find out what's going on with them, and give them feedback. I listened to a really interesting podcast just yesterday that was talking about feedback and how people who receive positive feedback is helpful. That's a great predictor of engagement. Having negative feedback, which doesn't mean you can still give positive feedback that's constructive, but negative feedback that tears down, right? That's the worst. But no feedback is almost as bad as the negative tearing down feedback, right? So lack of feedback leaves people assuming that they're not doing well. So form a connection with your people and provide feedback. And if you don't know how to do that, get some leadership training, get some leadership coaching, learn more about that because there are tools. It feels hard and difficult, but there are scripts and templates and ideas and possibilities for practice and all kinds of ways that a really good trainer or coach can help you do that. So if you're not sure how to do or how to provide hope and help people feel seen, known, and valued, and all the things we talked about, there is help available. So go get it.
Absolutely. There's courses online that are free and books at the library and even mentors that you should reach out to learn how to connect with your team better. I love that advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can hire a coach or a trainer. I know one who loves to do this kind of stuff.
Exactly. I know two of them.
Yeah, I know a couple.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you so much for your expertise today. And I know that the listeners are going to find a lot of value in this episode. A great team isn't just a group of people who work together. It's a group of people who trust, challenge, and support one another. Let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on LinkedIn by following Mindy East and make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. I'll see you in the next episode.